When Turkmenistan is mentioned, many people's reaction is, Turk, what? This lost country in Central Asia hardly ever makes the headlines, but it should. After all, we're talking about a place where the president erects golden statues of himself, invents a calendar with the months and days of the week named after him, and makes a book he wrote mandatory reading for a driver's license. All this is accompanied by endless deserts, a gate of hell, and a capital built entirely of white marble. If you think you've seen it all, hold on to this trip. Today, Bello Mundo takes you inside one of the most isolated countries on the planet, where each curiosity is more absurd than the next. Number 1. Location and geographical data. If you've never heard of Turkmenistan, don't worry. Many people have no idea where it is either, but I'll tell you right now, it's in the middle of a very peculiar neighborhood. Located in Central Asia, it borders Kazakhstan to the northwest, Uzbekistan to the north and northeast, Afghanistan to the southeast, and Iran to the south. And to top it off, there's a little piece of coastline bordered by the Caspian Sea in the west. But the country's greatest asset is not its lakes, forests, or lush mountains, because it simply doesn't have any. Around 70% of the country is covered by the Karakum Desert, a seemingly endless expanse of sand. The climate follows the script, absurdly hot summers and winters that can surprise with sub-zero temperatures depending on the region. The capital, Ashgabat, is in the south, near the Kopet Dag Mountains, which border Iran. But to call Ashgabat an ordinary city would be a mistake. This place looks like something out of a futuristic movie, an extremely luxurious ghost town. And we'll talk more about it in a moment. In fact, this feeling of emptiness isn't limited to the capital. In general, this is the impression that the whole country gives. To give you an idea, Turkmenistan has around 6 million inhabitants, the same as the entire state of Arizona, but in a territory that is twice as large. In other words, kilometers of car-free roads, huge cities with impeccable squares that are practically deserted, and a sea of sand surrounding everything. This is Turkmenistan, a place as exotic as it is unknown, and from here our journey through Turkmen weirdness begins. Number 2. Karakum Desert and the Gate of Hell. If there's one place that defines Turkmenistan well, it's the legendary Hell's Gate in the middle of the Karakum Desert. The name is sinister, but the story not so much. It all began in 1971, when Soviet geologists were exploring the region in search of oil. But instead of finding oil, they drilled into a gigantic reserve of natural gas. The ground couldn't cope, it collapsed and formed a crater more than 60 meters in diameter and 20 meters deep. So far, it would have been a disaster, but they had a brilliant idea and decided to burn the toxic gas, thinking that the fire would go out in a few days. Well, more than 50 years have passed, and the flames are still there, firm and strong. The result? A burning crater in the middle of the desert, burning non-stop and illuminating the night sky as if it were a direct portal to the underworld. Today, Hell's Gate is the country's biggest attraction, but don't think of it as a conventional tourist spot full of signs and souvenir stalls. Getting there is a mission in itself. You'll need a local guide, a 4x4 Jeep, and a lot of willingness to face precarious roads and the insane desert heat. But those who do venture out can assure you the views are breathtaking. After all, how many places in the world have had a flaming crater burning for half a century? Number 3. A closed regime and the cult of the leader. Like some countries that adopt a more isolated stance, Turkmenistan is governed by a patriarchal, macho, and authoritarian regime. If you've heard about the cult of personality in North Korea, you should know that it's not far behind here. The first post-independence president was Saparmurat Niyazov, who called himself Turkmenbashi, the father of all Turkmen. He ruled for 2 decades, imposing an almost religious worship on his figure. But things went even further. He decided that the calendar needed a makeover, and who better to pay homage to than himself and his mother? January became Turkmenbashi, a small tribute to himself, while April became Gurban Sultan, in honor of his mother. And not even the days of the week escaped. Tuesday was renamed Yazgun, Youth Day, and Thursday became Sogapgun, Justice Day. Because, of course, a simple weekday name wasn't enough. But perhaps nothing beats the greatest masterpiece of his vanity, the Ruhnama, a book written by himself which became compulsory reading in schools, universities, and amazingly, even to get a driver's license. And we'll tell you more about that book in a moment. After his death, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov took over, who at first promised to put an end to these exaggerations, but ended up repeating the script, only focusing on his own image. After all, it seems that the virus of presidential deification has taken hold in the country. Number 4. The obsession with the color white and forbidden black cars. It sounds like a joke, but it's true. One of the first acts of Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, the new presidential star, was to choose the color of the car that the population could use. You know that basic car color preference we have, like, I like black, gray, red? Well, in Turkmenistan, that's not exactly a free choice. In particular, black cars are banned from the capital, Ashgabat. Why? They say that the current president considers white to be the color of luck and prosperity, while black is synonymous with bad luck. Then, in 2018, several people woke up to find that their black cars had been towed away without warning. The only way to get the vehicle back? Sign an agreement to paint it white or, at most, silver. But the obsession with the color white doesn't stop with cars. It extends to the capital. Number 5. Ashgabat. Ashgabat is so full of white marble buildings that it's no coincidence that it entered the Guinness Book of Records as the city with the highest concentration of white marble buildings in the world. There are hundreds of public and private buildings clad in this material. The result is a brilliantly clear landscape, which shines even brighter under the scorching desert sun. At night, many buildings are illuminated with colorful lights, turning everything into a real light show, a sort of Las Vegas, but with few pedestrians. Many people describe the capital as an empty city, as there are hardly any people walking the streets, apart from a few security guards, gardeners, and cleaning crews. The explanation is that a large part of the population can't afford to live in the super-luxurious central area. As a result, many buildings are half-occupied or even empty. Even so, the government keeps the aesthetics impeccable, like a big stage to show the world an image of wealth and modernity. And if you think you've seen it all, wait until you see some of the other amazing buildings there. Number 6. Outlandish works. When it comes to eccentricity, Turkmenistan stands out, especially when it comes to extravagant constructions. One of the best examples of this? The world's largest indoor Ferris wheel. Yes, this architectural marvel exists, and like everything else there, it was designed to impress. The structure is almost 50 meters high and sits inside a gigantic, futuristic building in the middle of the desert. And what is the official justification for this madness? To create an air-conditioned space for family fun and to show the world Turkmenistan's architectural progress. But from the outside, it looks more like a whim of the regime, which loves to spend millions on monumental projects, even if they remain practically empty. And if getting married is part of your plans, Turkmenistan has the perfect, or bizarre, place for it: the wedding palace. Here, megalomania reaches another level. The building is a golden geometric monument that looks like a mixture of a giant disco ball and an intergalactic temple. Inside, a festival of luxury, huge halls, glittering chandeliers, imposing staircases, and lush carpets. But the most unusual detail comes now. Anyone who gets married there has to take an official photo with the president's portrait in the background. In other words, in addition to the couple in love, the country's leader ends up taking part in the wedding album, even without an invitation. Number 7. Alibi horses and dogs, the national sweethearts. If the color white is the president's obsession, two other national favorites also stand out: Akal Teke horses and Alibi dogs, also known as Central Asian Shepherds. Akal Teke horses are proudly called heavenly horses by Turkmen. They have a coat that can look metallic, shiny, and are known for their endurance in arid climates. Throughout history, they have been fundamental to transportation, trade, and warfare in the region. It's not uncommon to see giant statues of Akal Teke, and in practically all his appearances, the president must be on a horse adorned with golden bridles and crests. Turkmenistan is also known for its Alibi, or Central Asian Shepherd, breed of dogs. And not just any dog. The president has erected huge golden statues in honor of these dogs and has even presented leaders of other countries with Alibi puppies as a symbol of Turkmen friendship and pride. Number 8. Melon Day. If you like eccentric holidays, Turkmenistan won't disappoint. There is Melon Day, celebrated on the second Sunday in August. During the rule of the first president, Saparmurat Niyazov, the melon gained near-deity status, and he even named a variety after himself, Turkmenbashi, which, as we saw earlier, means the father of all Turkmen. On this festive day, the fruit is exhibited at fairs, in competitions for size, aroma, and taste, all with pomp and circumstance, as if it were a true national icon. Some people might find it curious or funny to have an entire holiday dedicated to the melon, but if you think about it, the fruit grows well in arid regions. It makes sense for them to be proud of something so present in the local cuisine and economy, although, of course, there is a certain exaggeration, typical of the authoritarian regime, in turning anything into propaganda. Number 9. Ruhnama, the Holy Book. Speaking of propaganda, we can't leave out the famous Ruhnama, a book written by former President Saparmurat Niyazov. He made it compulsory reading for all Turkmen, from school children to adults in the workplace. It was like an ideological manual containing philosophical and historical reflections and a lot of the leader's personal eccentricities, right? Not only was it compulsory reading, but you had to be an expert in Ruhnama to get a driver's license. Yes, to drive in Turkmenistan, it wasn't enough to understand the traffic laws. You also had to master the teachings of the great leader. Because, apparently, knowing about him was as essential as knowing how to brake a car. The justification was that all citizens should have a thorough knowledge of Turkmen history, culture, and morals. There were even promises of heavenly advantages for those who read the Ruhnama 3 times. A bit bizarre, but it was real. Today, the book's influence has waned as the new president has tried to shed the image of his predecessor and written his own book. But it still stands as a symbol of how strong the cult of personality can be in this country. Number 10. Restrictions on women. If so far we've seen some laugh-out-loud eccentricities, here things take a different turn. Being a woman in Turkmenistan is not easy at all. Restrictions range from dress code to something completely surreal. Driving a car can be a problem. And we're not talking about rumors. In recent years, several women have reported being stopped by the police and forced to get out of the vehicle simply for being women behind the wheel. The situation has worsened since 2018, when many women had their driving licenses suspended or simply denied. And if that wasn't enough, women are not allowed to sit in the front seat of the car unless they are direct relatives of the driver. None of this is written down in a formal law, but in practice the police treat it as if it were. Complain publicly? Not a chance. In Turkmenistan, challenging a rule can be costly, and for women it means living with discrimination and submission on a daily basis. For Turkmen women, complaining publicly is risky because freedom of expression is not the regime's strong suit. Therefore, they end up subjected to a scenario of submission and discrimination. Number 11. Beauty bans and dress codes. If the restrictions weren't enough already, the government decided to go further, banning beauty procedures and imposing a real dress code. Gel nails, eyelash extensions, Botox, or even dyeing your hair blonde? Forget it. That's because in 2023, authorities began inspecting beauty salons and fining those who offered these services. Civil servants were even forced to sign documents promising that they wouldn't use makeup or any artifice that mischaracterized the traditional Turkmen image. And the clothes, no jeans or leggings. Women must wear the balak, a pair of wide embroidered pants combined with long dresses. And it's not a choice, it's an imposition. The official justification? To preserve the country's values. But in practice, it's just another form of male chauvinist and patriarchal control. Number 12. Censored Internet and Turkmenet. Speaking of control, let's talk about the Internet. We live in the digital age, but in Turkmenistan, accessing the Internet is almost a privilege. The government controls everything, and most people only have access to Turkmenet, a super-limited intranet where international content is blocked or filtered. Want to use a VPN to bypass censorship? Forbidden. Almost any type of technology that allows you to escape the government's grasp is hunted down by the authorities. The few internet cafes that do exist require you to present documents in order to connect, and the fees are extremely high for the average citizen. Popular social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube are blocked. The result? There is almost no dialogue with the rest of the world, and official propaganda dominates the narrative for those inside the country. If you like marathoning series, posting stories, and keeping up to date with TikTok trends, in Turkmenistan this would be practically impossible unless you had access to illegal means and were brave enough to risk it. Number 13. Zero freedom of expression. Censorship on the internet is just the beginning. Here, freedom of expression is practically non-existent. Political opposition? It doesn't exist. Independent journalism? Not a chance. All media outlets belong to the government. Anyone who criticizes the regime disappears, is imprisoned, or has to flee the country. International reporters face the challenge of trying to enter Turkmenistan to investigate what is happening. But the government bars visas, monitors journalists, and prevents any information from getting out of hand. And if you think the old Soviet advertisements were exaggerated, Turkmenistans are a real spectacle. On TV channels, the president appears riding horses, singing, bowling, playing sports, and of course being glorified as a supreme genius. Meanwhile, most of the population suffers from unemployment, poverty, and a lack of basic products. But if the propaganda is anything to go by, Turkmenistan is paradise on earth, and anyone who dares to say otherwise will pay dearly for it. And that's it for today. But what about you? What did you think of these curiosities? Which of these facts shocked you the most? Do you know of any other eccentricities in this mysterious country? Let us know in the comments. For those of you who have watched this far, thank you very much and see you on your next adventure in our Bello Mundo.